Just be honest. 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 Just be real. Just be true. It's the honest.
Hello everyone, my name is Kiara Imani. I write TV reviews. There's a link in my bio down below. This is my first ever video review. I got a new ring light today, so I decided I was going to try it out, although I didn't do my hair and my makeup looks, well, I'm not wearing any. Ha 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 ha. So I don't know if it's a good thing that you can see my face clearly, but whatever. It's quarantine. We're all in this together. Ooh, let me cover up a little bit. Where was I? Okay, so today I am going to be reviewing Outer Banks. It's actually really funny. Obviously, my name is Kiara, just like one of the main characters, and my parents had a house at the Outer Banks growing up, so it was kind of weird to see my character portrayed on television. For a second, I was like, did somebody steal my life? What did I think about the show? Well, I thought it was okay. For all you fanatics, don't get mad. I understand there are lots of things to love about the series, and I'm going to talk about that, but I also think that there were a few holes, and because I thought the storyline was really cool, I'm just hoping that next season the writers kind of patch up the holes so that we get kind of a more holistic story and we're not constantly being pulled out by all of the things that don't really make sense. So the show starts out in kind of like a weird narration. It's almost like John B is doing this like Carrie Bradshaw, here's the story of my life type thing, and then the narration just kind of goes away. So that threw me off a little bit. Overall, there's a lot of like fighting and action, there's a treasure hunt. Who doesn't love any of that? I mean, I think as soon as I saw the show, I knew it was going to be a hit. I was surprised this morning to wake up and find that it was #1 on Netflix. And that's because they had pretty much all of the ingredients. I mean, the cast is ridiculously hot, right? Who doesn't want to see a whole bunch of hot teenagers? We'll talk about that too, because I know some of them were actually like in their 20s, and John B, I think, is what, 27? But who doesn't want to see a whole bunch of hot people running around the beach chasing treasure, right? We all want to watch that, or at least I do. So I knew the show was going to do well, but I think there are a few different inconsistencies that were worth pointing out. For me, the first thing was the fact that the writers never really talked about or mentioned race. Now, I am not a person who thinks race needs to be discussed in every television show and in every book. I'm going to say that up front. But this show particularly focused a lot on classism and how different types of people are treated differently because of their background. And it was never mentioned that like black men are much more likely to go to jail, and I couldn't really believe that the Pope's dad never said anything like you can't run around just getting arrested or acting crazy like the rest of your little white friends because it could mean something very different for you. I just thought it was a very interesting, creative decision just not to acknowledge the fact that Pope was a black man and Kiara was a black character. And I totally understand wanting to have a show that's colorblind, but the truth is, you see my color with my ring light. We see each other's colors, and that's not a bad thing. I think being different is awesome and it's worth celebrating. So that threw me off just a little bit. The other thing that really The other thing that really bothered me was the fact that nobody had cell phones like the whole show. I know, in the first episode they talk about the power going out, but having lived in the Outer Banks and lived through some storms, within the first day or so, the phones are usually the first thing that are back on. Like, I could understand if, the lights weren't working or the refrigerator was out or whatever, anything else, and their refrigerators were clearly on, but the phone lines were down and nobody had internet. When Pope ran out of his interview to go tell his friends about his new revelation, I just couldn't help thinking, this should have been a phone call. Another thing, the relationships. Don't hate me for this. I know, I'm sure a lot of you are super shipping John B and Sarah, and I mean, they're both ridiculously hot, and yeah, I get it. I totally understand that you don't have to defend the ship to me. Ha ha ha, make sure I stay covered up. But with that being said, I didn't like the fact that John B continuously put Sarah in really difficult situations. This is just my personal opinion, but when I get married one day, I would hope that my husband would want to protect me and not constantly put me in harm's way. I was shocked when he let her on the boat with him at the end, where, you know, by the way, there's no way they could have survived that storm in that tiny little boat in real life. I'm hoping they lived, obviously, because we all want a season 2. But that scene, I just had to side-eye a little bit. And then there was like one part where they didn't have life vests, and then they wake up on an island and they had life vests on, so like that was really confusing. But all that aside, I would have hoped that John B would have worked a little bit harder to protect Sarah. I mean, he was taking her on all these like drug raids and doing all this crazy stuff, and I'm like, okay dude, if you really love this girl, wouldn't you actually like try to keep her safe? Or maybe that's just my like unhealthy Edward, Bella, Damon and Stefan Salvatore, very vampire view of what relationships should look like. I don't know, but I would have wanted him to protect her a little bit more. I do think that she actually loved John B, and when John B was asked whether or not he was in love with Sarah, he didn't even have an answer. He was like, I mean, I don't know, she's kind of cool. Yeah, that's not acceptable. Initially, I wanted John B to be with Kiara, but as the show went on, I decided that I was a Kiara JJ person. Why? Because Kiara has such a kind heart. She loves saving people. She cares about little baby animals that can't protect themselves. And obviously JJ, coming out of, you know, the relationship he had with his parents, which we'll talk about that too, or the relationship he had with his dad, was very unhealthy, and there was a part of Kiara that really just like wanted to save him from that situation and help him through it. And I just thought they had such a tender moment when she went and hugged him in the hot tub that he spent all of his money on, and I was really hoping that they were going to get together. Not to say that Pope's not cute and all, but it was kind of weird. Like throughout the entire series, it was never like a Kiara Pope thing, and then in the last episode they're like, we love each other, let's like kiss and hold hands. So that threw me off a little bit. Okay, that's it for the ships for now. I also want to talk about the parent relationships, the parent-kid relationships in this show. Thought they were very interesting, okay? First of all, again, not trying to make this racial. I come from a black household. There is no way in hell I would have disrespected my parents the way that Pope and Kiara and the rest of those kids were disrespecting, well, really Pope and Kiara, because obviously, JJ's dad was just a horrible, terrible person, and John B didn't have parents. But yeah, Pope and Kiara was so disrespectful to their parents. Like, I get it, but at the same time, your parents are like paying for your lifestyles. They've raised you. They care about you. Who are you to just be like, no, Dad, I'm gonna get on this boat, and what you gonna do about it? That never would have worked out in my household. I would have been living on the streets. So, you know, that was a teenage dream, okay? That's just not real life. I also really didn't understand how John B was getting all of his bills paid. I know he had that like part-time job or whatever working for Ward, but like, bro, you got electricity and power and water and health insurance and all these other miscellaneous bills. How are you paying for all that? Because your dad's gone, he took all the money. Like, how are you funding your lifestyle? That, you know, I mean, I'm an adult. I'm 30 years old, I will admit it, so I couldn't help but think about that as I was watching the show, like, who is funding these kids' lifestyles? And then, oh my gosh, the relationship between JJ and his dad. I would say those were the scenes where I got the most emotional in the entire series. Like, wow. To see someone go through something like that, physical abuse, obviously, and being abused by someone who is supposed to like love and care and protect you is really hard. And especially, I think a lot of times in our society, men aren't really given the space to process their emotions and to feel. So to watch him kind of respond and see how he reacted to that just made me think about a lot of people in my own life. You know, they say hurt people. And a lot of times when people are acting out or they're bullying or they're, you know, excessively violent, it's because something's going on at home or someone's treated them terribly. And it really makes you stop and want to get to know people's stories, because I hated JJ at the beginning. I was like, who is this troublemaking, white privileged character? But then as the show went on, I was like, oh, there's a lot to him. I get it. So I loved that the story was complex in that way. Another thing people have been talking about, the ferry ride that they took from, I think it was from the Outer Banks to Charlotte, or is that where they went? Oh no, they went somewhere. They took a ferry ride where they shouldn't have been able to take a ferry ride. Everyone's like, oh, it takes like, oh, Chapel Springs or Chapel Hill. Yeah, Chapel Hill, I think that's where they were going. People were like, oh, it takes like 4 hours to get there in real life. You can't get there on a ferry. I get it, it's just a television show, but at the same time, I think things like that tend to take you out the story, especially, you know, if for those of you that don't know, they didn't actually film at the Outer Banks, which is fine too, and I totally understand the reasoning. I read an article that they didn't want to film there. Actually, I read all kinds of things, and I don't know what's true or what's not true. Bottom line, they chose not to film at the Outer Banks. But when you have things in the story that are just like blatantly unrealistic, it pulls people out of the story and it turns them into critics as opposed to just like viewers who are like enjoying the story. So I'm hoping that next season they clean up a little bit of those inconsistencies, not because I think they make like for a bad show or for a bad watch, because I was very entertained the entire season. I just think it just causes all of this like extra when we could be talking about the story, and instead we're like fighting over ferry rides. All of that being said, oh yeah, and there was a lot of excess violence. I didn't think all of the like fights were necessary, especially the first couple episodes. And like, okay, I know teenagers fight, but like, really? Like y'all trying to kill each other? Is it that serious? But all that being said, I did really enjoy the season overall. I'm thinking it's going to be at least a season 2 and probably a season 3. Netflix is pretty good about continuing their shows, although they canceled Anne with an E that I love. Bring back Anne with an E. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Let me know what you thought about the show in the comments. Who were you shipping? What were you feeling? What did you like? What didn't you like? Let's talk about it, and thanks for watching.
Just be honest, 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 just be honest.